All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 1 of Master Your Metabolism, the CGM experiment, CGM collective. Our goal tonight is to get everybody up to speed and ready so that we can make sure that everybody's got their devices for next week and got everything else that they need. And get people onto the WhatsApp group so that we can share our insights and our tracings and all the things. So anyways, the way to get the CGM, if you live here in Texas and you are my patient, I can absolutely write this for you, and I will write this for you. If you are not currently my patient and you have a doctor who's willing to write it for you, then I'm going to give you exactly what you need to ask for so that your primary care doc can get this for you, because it's really, it's one of these things where it takes a couple of days. Generally, they're going to have to order it at your pharmacy, and so it takes a couple of days. So we are going to be using the Freestyle, let me see if I can get that right up by the camera, the Freestyle Libre 3 sensors. And, oh my gosh, tight sleeve, that was a bad choice. I can't show it to you. I can't show it to you because my sleeve is too tight. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, they last 2 weeks. So for the 4 weeks of this program, we will need 2 of them. And so that's 28 days. And then if you want to continue wearing them, then ask your doctor to put a couple of refills on there. Because generally, when you start, it's nice to go for 2 or 3 months, just because sometimes 4 weeks isn't quite long enough to get all the information that you want to out of it, to do all the personal experiments that are helpful to know what's going to be the best for you. So ask for a couple refills in case you decide to keep going. So Freestyle, so write this down. And Hoya, I already wrote yours, so you don't have to worry about that. So Freestyle Libre, Libre, the number 3. If they don't have the 3 and it turns out they give you the 2, it's okay. You do not need the reader device. As long as you have a phone, the phone becomes the sensor, so you don't need a reader. So you ask for sensors only. You ask for 2 of them. The prescription will need to say exactly how to word it. It's going to say apply sensor subcutaneously as directed every 2 weeks. So write that down. Apply subcutaneously Q2 weeks as directed. That's doctor speak for that. And then dispense 2, because we need 2 for each 2-week period. And then the 1 refill or 2 refills. So if you are not in my state and you do not have a primary care doctor to write this for you, there is an email that is going out that has 2 links of 2 companies that will sell you a pair of CGMs or a single CGM if you only want to buy 1. They are a bit more expensive. And the pharmacy that you go to really matters on this. So most people, if you're not diabetic, your insurance is not going to cover this. And so the cost, if you have a Costco card and you use their Costco prescription, Costco members prescription, CMPP, Costco member prescription program, they will sell them to you if you ask them for $60 for the 2, which is a great price. The other way to know what the prices are going to be is to go onto GoodRx, the website GoodRx, and check with the local pharmacies around you and see who has the best coupon price. And I will tell you, coupons are amazing because I was writing a prescription for somebody today and they didn't get their prescription. And so I called the pharmacy back and I said, why didn't my patient get their prescription? And the answer was, well, their insurance didn't approve it. And I'm like, okay, well, how much was it going to cost? Oh, $137.92. I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's kind of high. Why didn't they approve it? Oh, well, they only want generic. Okay, fine, whatever. But this is the kind of medicine where you don't really want generic. So what's the coupon price? Oh, $34. I was like, really? Oh my goodness. So I called the patient and I said, okay, we can probably get you generic for a little bit less, but the coupon price is $34. Is that okay? And they were like, of course, it's a better medicine. So yeah, pharmaceutical prices are silly. That's the nicest word I can use to describe what's going on. Anyway, moving on. So that's how you get your devices. Thing number 2, I need to make sure I have your complete mailing address because I'm going to mail everybody a little envelope with cover patches in it. And that's going to go out tomorrow morning. And the cover patches are these little clear plastic. They're about this big around circles that once we put on the device, then we'll put the little clear circle over the top of it to hold it on. And once again, I cannot show you because my stupid sleeve. That was not brilliant of me, but anyway, so you'll get, I'm going to send you 3 or 4 of those. So you'll have enough for the rest of the program. Third thing, there is an app that you need to get for your phone, and it is the Freestyle Libre 3 app. It looks like
if we were to get the Libre 2, would the app still work for it?
yes.
Okay,
and
cool.
this is what it looks like. And that's going to be in the email too for next week. So the other thing that I have done is I have made a little video about how to set up the app because it's not super simple. And it takes a little bit of time. So I would prefer that everybody have that done before they come to next week's meeting. So in the email will be a link to the video that I made, and it's on YouTube, and you can just go and watch it while you're setting up your app. So thing number 3 is the WhatsApp group. And so I need to make sure that I have everybody's phone number and that everybody has WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is a cool private way to communicate with people. It's better than a Facebook group because you don't miss the information. So
it's fabulous.
you have it on your phone already?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
with my kids being all over
Use
the
it for
place.
your kids. Great. Okay.
Mhm.
So that one looks like this. So it looks like a phone in a little emoji circle. And
I guess I should say my adults instead of my kids.
your adult. Well, they're your kid. They'll always be your kids. I mean, come on. I don't know. How old is Kristen now? Is she 30?
Kristen is 27.
27, so pretty close.
And Christopher's 25.
Okay.
And
So
and then
they're not children anymore, but they're still kids.
Yeah. Well, and the older ones are about to be 42 and 38. So yeah.
Definitely not kids anymore.
No.
Okay, so we're going to communicate by WhatsApp, and I'm going to make a brand new group and invite everybody to that group. Hopefully that will run pretty seamlessly because I would really like to have that all set up by the end of tomorrow. And then the final thing is, in addition to the sensor itself, and you'll just need one of them, I want you to bring a notebook and a pen and an alcohol swab or some rubbing alcohol and a piece of cotton, because we're going to need that when we put the device on. And you will also want some kind of easily accessible t-shirty, short sleeve kind of shirt, so that you can reach the back of your arm, because they don't want you really to put it anywhere except for right here on the back of your arm. So that's what we're going to need for next week. All right. So any
Yay.
questions about that?
The cover patch,
The cover
Have
patch,
you
I'm
ever-
going to mail them to you.
right? But have you ever heard anybody with issues with the adhesive?
You know, I am one of the most adhesive sensitive human beings on the planet, and these things have not bothered me one speck.
Okay.
And
I can't even wear a Band-Aid.
yeah, well, these are much better than Band-Aids, and even my
Okay.
mom doesn't react to them, and
Good.
she's even worse than I am. So yeah, so they're very, very hypoallergenic. They seem to
Okay.
be extremely good.
Good.
So hopefully no problems. So do not put the device on before the call. I really do want to be on screen with you to help you put it on. I've had a couple of people have little accidents and they ruined the thing and had to start over. And it's like, you know, Abbott's pretty nice. They'll give you another one once, but you don't want to go. Oh, here's another interesting thing that I learned on the webinar the other night, which is that if you will ask them, Abbott will send you one for free as a sample.
I
So-
was able today at my doctor's office, they gave me a sample, which is
Gave
has
you
one
one.
in it. Mhm.
Nice. Very nice.
So I didn't even have to go through Abbott. But
Wonderful. That's great.
Abbott rejected me anyhow because I have supplemental. I have Medicare supplemental insurance. So
Ooey on them.
yeah. So
All right.
way it goes.
So yeah. So anyway, let me go ahead and show you guys this cute little presentation that I made for you, so we can get started. So I'm going to share my screen. And we are going to talk about, why is this important? Why should we care about measuring our blood sugar if we're not diabetic? So there are 38 million people right now in the US that have type 2 diabetes, and another third of adults have impaired blood sugar control, which means they're already pre-diabetic, which is pretty scary because diabetes is a pretty devastating condition to have and just causes all kinds of misery for people, you know, all aside from the fact that it makes you feel crummy and exhausted and everything. It increases your risk for lots of different problems like heart disease, cancer, dementia, bone fractures, hip fractures, infections. And the folks who have pre-diabetes, at least 70% of them are going to progress to diabetes without an intervention. And even if you don't meet the hemoglobin A1C criteria for either diabetes or pre-diabetes, you can still have significant metabolic disease. So it's really important to know where you're at as far as this goes. And if you are overweight and would like to lose weight, that really pretty much almost guarantees that you're somewhere in the spectrum of risk for this. So, but variations of glucose control are pretty large from person to person, even in people who are not diabetic. And you don't even have to be overweight to have impaired glucose control. Furthermore, it's really way easier to start reversing the process if you don't have diabetes yet, because once you get to where your blood sugars are up, even when you're fasting, it's much, much harder to get control of this. And a lot of metabolic damage happens way before you meet those diabetes criteria. So it's even more important. And for reasons that we can discuss later, there's kind of a vicious cycle of fatty accumulation in liver and the muscle and other organs that worsens the glucose metabolism even more. And so the more it gets worse, the more it gets worse. So how is diabetes diagnosed? Well, to answer that question, we need to look a little bit to answer this, why should we care? Let's look at how diabetes is usually diagnosed, because the standard ways that doctors say, oh, this person doesn't have diabetes, this person does have diabetes, is by a blood test called the hemoglobin A1C, and then also by your fasting blood glucose. And with fasting blood sugar, anything less than 99 is quote unquote normal. Anything up to 125 is considered pre-diabetes, and then 126 and above is diabetes. The hemoglobin A1C is a little bit more sophisticated. What it does is that it measures indirectly the average of your blood sugar over a 90-day, a trailing 90-day period. But it's pretty inaccurate and sometimes varies a lot because of factors like anemia. And there are other things, like if you're iron deficient, it's going to be off. There's other kinds of stuff. But anyway, so these average numbers also don't really help us understand the factors that influence the hour to hour, the day to day swings in blood sugar in response to our activities and our meals. So here's one of the why we care. And keep in mind that like I mentioned, that A1C, hemoglobin A1C, is a rough measurement of average glucose. But even with it being rough, it's still useful to look at it as a continuum rather than an arbitrary cutoff. And this huge study that was done looked at something called all-cause mortality. And that just looks at, okay, if your hemoglobin A1C is in this range versus this range versus this range, this one, then you can see that the relative increase in non-diabetics, which is everybody from here to here, is increased over that range by 320 times. I mean, it's a huge increase. So from 5.7 per 1,000 person years to 18.5 per person years, per 1,000 person years, excuse me. And I don't look at this line, just look at this highlighted yellow line. It's much more understandable. Anyway, if you go and you look at the rate of heart attacks, and we're now breaking it down. This is not all-cause mortality. This is now heart attacks and death from heart causes. It's 1.6 per 1,000 in the low group, and 6, so 4 times higher in the non-diabetic impaired glucose tolerance people. And then this bottom line is cancer. And you can see once again, it's much higher the higher you go on this scale goes from 3 to 4 to 6 to 8.5 to over 9 when you get into the actual diabetics. And so it's a scary thing to have impaired blood sugar. So if hemoglobin A1C and fasting glucose aren't a good way to measure, what's a better way to measure? Well, so this graph is kind of a representation of the original research that was done to say, okay, when you eat food, what is the normal excursion in your blood sugar? What should it look like? So they did something called a 2-hour oral glucose tolerance test. And you can see that the number, well, I can't get it to, anyway, it starts at about 80, 85, and it goes up. And the dashy line down here is kind of the lowest quarter of the people, and these solid lines up here, kind of the highest. So at an hour, it was about 155 to 140 as what the normal excursion in blood sugar should be. But look over here at the insulin level. So the insulin level in response to that much blood sugar, in some people, it was only 50. And in some people, it was as high as twice that, which is like, whoa, what's going on there? And then it goes back down over a 3-hour period. So that's what these graphs are. This is the blood sugar. This is the insulin. And it's a continuum, a range of what's considered healthier. But it's very, very interesting that some people have way more insulin than other people, because those people, even though their blood sugar control is pretty normal, their insulin is higher, which means they actually already have insulin resistance. They're just not out of that normal range yet. And insulin itself causes problems, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But what about all us schmucks who are somewhere in between normal and what's considered diabetes, which is this blood sugar at 2 hours, way, way up here? That's what this red dot is. What is going on with us? Well, we may have a little bit higher blood sugar excursions, and we might have a lot higher insulin excursions, and you would never know it because we don't generally check insulin. And this test is done very, very infrequently on people. This part of the test is almost never done on people, except maybe pregnant ladies. But
Wow.
can we honestly say that somebody that's here is totally fine and somebody here is not? Of course not. So we just saw that. And logically, this disease process exists on a continuum, and it's not just the average blood sugar, because research is now showing that there is much more harm in these extreme variability excursions. So if you're going up to 200, even for an hour after you're eating, that's much, much more harmful than if you're staying in this low range. And if your insulin is going above 50, 60, then that's much better than if the same blood sugar range, but your insulin's going up above 90. So there was another study that showed that your coronary artery disease mortality over 20 years was 270% higher in the non-diabetics with these elevated postprandial glucose responses. So that's important. It's important for us to know these things. So another study that they did was where they used these widely, the quick, simple measurements that can show us accurately how to reduce our risk for these diseases before we get diabetes. So there's this concept of glucotypes, which is where certain groups of people have distinct blood sugar response patterns with normal fasting blood sugars. So in this study, it was very, very interesting, a big group of normal people who were eating controlled meals, they found out that there were 3 subgroups in those normals. And this is not even prediabetes. These are still the normals. And what they said was your normal fasting glucose, your normal fasting insulin, and your normal postprandial glucose. So they called those type 1. And then the next group, the sugar levels were normal in the postprandial, which means after you eat, PP, that's what that means, normal fasting, but then their insulin was higher. That was the only difference between this group and this group. And then the third group is the postprandial glucose getting up out of that normal range and the insulin rising even higher, but their fasting glucose still normal. And what they decided on the risks of developing diseases later is that about 25% of this group who were normal by traditional standards still have pre-diabetic and diabetic range blood sugars about 15% of the time. And
Wow.
not only are the negative effects of metabolic disease caused by the elevated blood glucose, they are caused directly by the elevated insulin levels. And so what you can do is you can say, okay, at this 1 hour mark, I'm going to multiply the glucose level by the insulin level. And that gives us something called a HOMA-IR, which is a doctor test that you don't need to remember. But it gives us a really nice gradient of risk. You look at these postprandial HOMA-IRs, and it was pretty shocking to me that there's people that are not even considered pre-diabetic who are having these elevated levels of risk. And if you have a HOMA-IR and you're fasting blood tests, which is, like I said, it's glucose times insulin, and then there's a constant that you multiply it. And if the number comes up to 1 or less, then you're perfect, you're great. If the number is up to 2, you're okay. If the number is beyond 2, then it is just into the higher and higher risk. So we can use this information to predict, and even better yet, prevent diabetes, because the more and the higher peaks you get after eating in blood sugar, the worse those outcomes. And that's even in the non-diabetics. Well, what is this sophisticated testing? Well, I'm wearing one right now, and you're going to be wearing one next week. So anyway, so the CGM provides us with real-time continuous data. Unlike the single blood test for glucose or for the hemoglobin A1C, it captures the fluctuations in response to various factors that we can modify. And it allows us to see in real time what are the triggers, so that we can tomorrow at the same time say, well, okay, maybe instead of mashed potatoes, I'm going to eat mashed cauliflower and see how I like it. This is particularly useful in people over 50, as fasting blood sugars and oscillations tend to creep up with age, even in people who don't genetically have insulin resistance. So CGM use is really pretty cost effective, because as a tool to motivate habit change, it works like in over 50% of the people who wear them. They will have sustained dietary changes to sustained habit changes to improve blood sugars. And they don't have to keep using it for years and years and years. Or for example, if you go and you get Wegovy and you're paying, I don't know, $200 to $500 a month for your Wegovy, even if you can get it for that cheap, that's for the rest of your life. And that's a lot of darn money. Whereas usually with the CGM use, once you figure out what works for you, you don't have to keep using it unless you just want to. It costs a tenth of the treatment to a tenth of the cost to prevent diabetes than it does to treat diabetes after it happens over the lifetime of the person. It is really empowering, and I've been wearing mine for, gosh, about 6 months now. My husband's been doing it too, and it really does empower each person who's doing it to take a more active role in their health and prevention of disease. And it's really personalized. It's really, really cool to see, you know, one person gets this little blip and another person gets this great big giant blip. So, for example, I'm just going to show you this because this was me eating a Whataburger lunch. And ideally, my peak should have been about here. And you can see that my peak was really twice as much as that. And not only did I get this nice double peak, but I got a kind of a crash afterwards where I went pretty low. Probably for me, that was about 80. And the problem with when you crash low like that is it makes you hungry again. And then you want to go eat some more. And it's like, well, that was darn stupid, wasn't it? But anyway, you can
But
see.
it tasted good at the time.
Well, it tasted good at the time, and you can see how low I was when I ate. I was pretty hungry. And this is one of the other things that you learn not to do is let yourself get super, super hungry because you know what is going to happen.
Yep.
Anyway, the ratio, and this is something we'll explore in a lot more detail. The ratio of carbohydrates to fats consumed significantly impacts the level of this number, which is, we call this postprandial hyperglycemia when you're getting up above the 140, 150 range. So the amount of protein, when you eat your protein, there's all kinds of cool things that you can find out by doing this, and then next time doing something different. So here's the next one. If you have if you have high blood sugar when it's time to go to bed, your sleep quality is going to be way worse. And if your sleep quality and or your timing is bad, then your sugar is going to be high the next day. Not only your fasting sugar when you wake up in the morning, but your response to meals. So the CGM is going to help you monitor, one, your nighttime glucose before you go to bed. Two, if you want to, your blood sugar throughout the night. And now I will tell you that when I first started with mine, and for the first 2 nights after you put it on, I'm going to recommend that you turn the app off while you're sleeping. Because the first time that alarm goes off to say that your blood sugar is low, it's going to scare you out of your bed. and you're going to be like, what the heck just happened? And you're going to be all scared. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Do I need to go eat a candy bar? Blah, blah. No. You know, if you don't have low blood sugar all the time and have symptoms with it, then there's no point in you knowing that you had low blood sugar at 1 a.m. until the next day when you can go, oh, look, I had low blood sugar at 1 a.m. Because anytime you turn the app back on, it's going to backload all the data so that you'll know what happened. But laying awake worrying about it is a big fat no. All right. So another thing that we're going to learn about is the kind of exercise that really helps people, because there's this myth that the harder you exercise, the more calories you burn. And it's really not true. And we're going to go into that in quite some detail. But you can use the CGM to assess the impact of the exercise timing and the intensity on your blood sugar response. Because if you do a hard workout and all of a sudden your blood sugar is shooting up, then you know, okay, that was too hard because it was perceived by your body as stress, and stress raises cortisol, and cortisol raises blood sugar. So it's really interesting to see which exercise blunts the spikes in blood sugar and which one accelerates them. And of course, there are additional benefits of physical activities, such as improved cognitive health, improved cardiovascular health, stress reduction, and just generalized feeling better about yourself when you've done something active. So the next thing is that, we're going to see that stress reduction techniques do actually have some direct effect on your insulin levels, your cortisol levels, and thus your blood sugar levels. So very interesting. So when you engage in physical activity after a meal, it can blunt a spike in blood sugar. If you engage in physical activity before a meal, it can improve your glucose control once you eat the meal. So there's all kinds of cool kind of stuff going on there. And that is what I've got for you today. We are going to talk more next week once everybody gets their devices, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Okay, questions? Nothing right now? All right.
Nope. Excited to get started.
Okay, so I am going to stop the recording, and then we can work on getting you guys both onto the WhatsApp. So stand by.